we're not going to wait for Ava then, one of the schools.
Actually, I think I might just.
I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Age-Friendly and Accessibility Committee on Monday, May 31st, 2021. We'd like to welcome two new members, Jenna Heffernan and Ellen Miller. Welcome. Thank you. And adoption of the minutes. So there's a recommendation that the minutes of the Age Accessibility Committee held on March 29th, 2021 be adopted. Need a mover? And a seconder?
Second.
Okay, we have Fair and Bloom. And any errors or omissions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Into new business. Staff updates and BC Transit bus stops. And I think that's Sean, Mr. Smith.
We've got, thank you, Your Worship. There's been a couple odds and ends, and I think this committee is largely aware of it because it went out in email, but for those new members as well, we can let them know. First off is around BC Transit bus stops. So we do have two new bus stops or bus shelters that we are in the process of receiving right now. We really appreciated this committee's feedback on the design last time around. So this is the covered stops that has half of it with a bench and the other half is open for wheelchair access to be under the shelter there. So we're excited about that. And so this committee is aware also, we are in the process right now, we've just started up the process, I should say, with BC Transit of doing a full scope service review that is going to look at where our current bus stops are, where further stops are going to be needed, where they're going to be needed as a result of development up to 5 years in the future. So ordinarily, we always have the opportunity to approach things on kind of an ad hoc, one-off basis, but we've seen a fair bit of growth and change in the city of Merritt, and so kind of doing this full-scale review has been asked for, and it's definitely needed. So our Planning and Development Services team has been working closely with them, as has Public Works and Finance. So we don't have an exact date for when that's going to be completed, but we would happily share the results with this committee afterwards so that we can talk through and identify potentially any holes that are in that. This committee should also know, thank you very much for your feedback on the length of time to cross Nicola Avenue. That was something that was mentioned at the last meeting. I was able to get in touch with the province, and I'm going to be honest, great service by them. They looked at it, reviewed it, and were able to add some extra time to the crosswalks at Nicola as a result of the feedback of this committee. So I thought it was just phenomenal the way they were able to get that turned around so quickly on this committee suggestion. So that was really well done. Has anybody used it? Have you noticed that the extra time has been helpful? I think there was about 8 or 9 extra seconds added. So
makes a difference. I've noticed too.
Good. And it feels much more comfortable, safer now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, we are happy to hear it because I think that was the goal at the end of the day. The last thing that was talked about, and we've received news from BC Hydro in relation to a lighting program that they're rolling out across British Columbia right now. But we have 600 and some odd lights in the city. The BC Hydro lights are going to be changed from the current style to an LED light, which is going to be much brighter. It does contribute to safety, and I know that that's one of the things that also was talked about and asked for. I want to acknowledge that the one complaint that they've had, and although it's much lower than the people who are complaining about what was there before, is that it's a whiter light, and so it can be a little bit more harsh or bright, particularly in the evenings, but that harshness and brightness is what actually makes it light at the end of the day. So, yeah, that's exactly right. So in case you hear, people extend that feedback that they just don't like the color as much, or it's a little bit harsh, that is something that they've heard comments on, but overall the visibility will be improved by that. Now that isn't going to be every single streetlight in the city of Merritt, again, because it's just the ones that are BC Hydro lights, but it will allow us the opportunity to then implement a complementary city plan that we're looking at right now for how we can roll out the rest of the lights.
So are these mainly on the main arterial streets?
It's all over town. I think they provided a map showing what they all look like, but yeah, it's all over the community with the number of lights that are covered.
And the number I think was 624. I don't know why I remember that.
I know it's six. Yeah. I'll go with that, but I don't want to get quoted because I can't remember the exact number. But it'll be a good size, good number of the lights. So those were the primary updates that I wanted to present from the last meeting that aren't also, that Linda Brick has an update on the Taxi Saver program as well, but that's separate.
Can I ask a question on I guess it's maintenance, but it's not really maintenance. Some of the bus stops, and I think the one up at the hospital is one of them, it's just in the wintertime, you're stepping out to almost the ditch or whatever it is, and I thought we were going to look at doing something with that. Do you recall that at all? I'm not sure if I've had this conversation with you or not, so I'm asking you if I have brought that up.
I always get nervous because this is a trick question.
It's not a trick question.
Your Worship, I have not done anything, or we haven't talked about that, but it is absolutely something we can have a conversation about. So what's the specific concern? So we can have, just so you also know, we are starting up kind of an internal committee on the staff side that's going to address streetscape, and separately we'll address transportation as well. But these types of requests we'll bring back to those committees and they can kind of review them more thoroughly, because what we found is just having one person speak for something is not always the best approach. So
we don't have wide shoulders up there, and so when the snow plows come in, they plow big heaps on the side when we have snow, and it's just really awkward to get off the bus when it's pulled over to the side, and there's no real bus pull-out there, from what I understand. So did I say that? I think it was Chris that brought that to me, and I'll have you speak to it then, Chris, from here on.
When the bus stops on Bow Street up by the hospital there's no wide path to get it out, so that now the bus is in the laneway in order for that passenger to get off, which creates a safety problem because the bus can get hit and the person, whether it be able walking person or a disabled person, would get hurt as they were getting off the ramp or coming down the stairs. So I mentioned it'd be nice if we build out the next section for the bus to pull in, and then people can get off in a safe manner.
okay, Your Worship, what we'll do is we will have our team look at a review of that particular bus stop and see what recommendations we may be able to make.
Thank you. And was that the only bus stop we were talking about that was in that kind of a predicament, because it was on the highway? Or our main street, not a highway?
There's other bus stops like that, like the one that's in behind Wardco, but then that encroaches on property. So that's kind of hard to fix. You know, the bus is still stopping, traffic has to stop behind it. But, you know, where there's high traffic, like on Nicola and Vogue, those bus stops would be nice if they could be brought in. But then there's people's property you have to consider as well.
Yeah. Whether it's an immediate solution or something that we would look at for a longer term plan moving forward, it's something that we can review and discuss as a team.
Thanks. Greg, can you do me a favor and turn on Susan's mic so that it's on permit? There. Is that it? There. Good. Then you can respond. respond when needed.
As needed,
Whatever.
whatever, careful what you wish.
Yeah. So, yeah, if staff can look at the issue, then it's a matter of that snow buildup, because there's no other room to get around it somehow.
Yeah, I should add one other small item, but I know it was also requested by this group. We are going to make sure that every bus shelter has a garbage can beside it. And I recognize that seems like a small, minute issue, but it's really important, and it's something we've talked about with our team. We rolled a number of them out, but just for numbers, it's something that to have every single one done, we are in the process of ordering and making it happen. So we want people to use the garbage cans, and that's a great way to encourage that. So it's a small and simple thing, but good feedback and something that we've got on the books right now.
Good, thank you. So any questions regarding the staff updates? Ava?
Hi, it's not a question, I just want to apologize for coming in late and disrupting the meeting. We're just in the process of moving, so I'm here sweaty and boxes dirty, and I just wanted to say thank you and apologize. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to taxi saver program. And Ms. Brick, you have the staff report on this.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is reporting back up to the committee on a few things that were discussed at the committee in regards to transit. So bear with me because there's quite a lot to speak about in this one. The committee had asked about if we could implement certain things here in the city, and so I had a chance to talk with BC Transit. One of the things that we really were looking for was a taxi saver program. And BC, when I looked into the program, what it is that it's usually operated in larger municipalities where there's a full handy-dart program that's already in place. The taxi saver program is, it works in conjunction with that, and the support for the taxi saver program usually comes from the handy-dart program. As the City of Merritt doesn't have a handy-dart program, the BC Transit doesn't support having a taxi saver program here. What they do have in place is the on-request service. So, which means that if someone wishes to have a specific pickup, so it's a curb service, they can phone 24 hours in advance and request that they be picked up and dropped off at a certain spot along the route to attend appointments. What Merritt also has is the Kamloops Transit service. They provide the health connection, the regional service between Kamloops and Kelowna on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so that is the bus connection service that comes through and picks up people to attend appointments in Kamloops or in Kelowna. So those are the services that we have. That service is 100% funded by Interior Community Health. So we did request to have that expanded, but as it's funded by Interior Community Health, it's not something that BC Transit is looking at expanding. And the Interior Community Health, it would have to take a service away from another community to be able to expand our community service. So that's not something that's being supported at this time either.
What about timing? Because there was a lot of issues on when our local bus system meets up with the health connector bus.
Yes, so when we enter, as part of the larger review that's going to be happening with BC Transit, they are going to look at that. They're willing to kind of look and see if that can be accommodated, if it can be moved, if the pickup location can be moved. They're willing to look at that as well. The on-demand service, they're also willing to provide better awareness of it. So they're going to do a small ad campaign. They've got about $400 in the budget to provide advertising to promote that service so that people are more aware of it.
We also have a city website.
That will work.
That can help.
Yes, we definitely can, and we will work with that, and we will help promote it that way as well.
Thank you.
There was an ask from BC Transit as part of the, specifically here to this committee, as part of the review that they're going to be doing for the expansion of service. Because of COVID, the staff members from BC Transit aren't able to travel, so what they've actually asked the Age-Friendly and Accessibility Committee members to do is if we can report back to them on any improvements in the service that we would like to see. So they're encouraging every one of our members to go ride the bus and then report back to us, and then we can provide them with a full report on any improvements for the service from the perspective of people on this committee.
Good idea. How do we access it? Do we just tell them that we're on this committee and we?
We would do a full report from the committee that we can get together, provide all of the feedback, and then provide them with a full report.
I'm just wondering how they're gonna let us on.
Oh, onto the
Because we're
bus.
probably not gonna be on one.
No, we would not be able to, if anyone has an opportunity to go out and ride the bus, to go out and ride the buses on just throughout our daily lives, and then just be really aware and cognizant of any disability issues or any barriers that you're encountering or anything that you can see that could possibly be done differently. Then we can report back to this committee, and then this committee can report to BC Transit.
And Mr. Smith, you wanna?
I just wanted to make sure anytime we're asking somebody to incur expense for a committee reason, we'll cover the cost of bus tickets. So the next, how we're gonna distribute them, I'll make sure of. It would have been easiest.
Can we get?
I'm gonna see if I can get some tickets before they leave here today, is what I'm gonna see if we can do. So.
Thank you. Yes. Can you? Oh yeah, you got it.
Yeah, so I've had the privilege of riding the bus with my mother, who is in a wheelchair, and completely ride for free, which is very wonderful, I think. And we've taken advantage of the door-to-door, or I think they call it door-to-door, but on demand, thank you. And it's always been wonderful service.
Good to hear.
Your Worship, just one more thing. In regards to the on-demand service, what the Nicolet Valley Transit Society does as well is if that on-demand service is not available, if they're fully booked for the day, because they're allowed to have, it allows for 2 bookings per route per day. And if those are full, what they have done in the past is they have made arrangements for people to receive a cab ride, and that they've been reimbursed. So there is some support
Okay.
to the community that way as well, and the transit supports that option as well.
So it is a bit of a taxi saver program, just not
It's slightly
as
different.
big.
Yeah, it's on a much smaller scale, but that support is there.
Councillor Fair.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, we know that taxi services don't have wheelchair accessible vehicles, so that's still somewhat of a weakness, but, I'm really glad to hear that, that on-demand service is available. I didn't know about that, so it'd be great to see that promoted and shared and communicated.
Well, that's maybe something we can communicate. Well, we don't have a communications manager, but when we do.
It will be on their docket.
Yeah, thank you. My last communications manager was Will, and he left on Friday. That was his last day. Mr. Kirk.
Yes, Your Worship, I've had quite a few communications with the both taxi companies here in town. And I've asked them several times when they would purchase a wheelchair van. And they said nope. I know other cities like Vernon, Kelowna, Kamloops, they've issued that any taxi company working within their jurisdictions have to have at least one wheelchair van per company, if not more.
Is that a taxi requirement or is that a city requirement?
That's a city requirement on the taxi company. So what I mentioned in an earlier meeting was that a bylaw be put in motion, that each taxi company here in town have at least one wheelchair vehicle. That way, if someone that's using a walker or a scooter or in a wheelchair, if they need to go to the hospital in the middle of the night, or if the bus services aren't available during the daytime, that they would have this access and mobility service for them in the town of Merritt.
Putting a requirement on a business may end up sending them over the edge financially. Is there any grant or funds that the city can access to aid in something like that?
That I'm not aware of. There's any grants.
And I don't know that we're aware of it. Mr. Smith, do you know any?
I just wanted to note one slight difference because of the size of Merritt versus other communities. For example, I have less personal familiarity with Vernon, but I know some of the island communities and lower mainland communities. It's the local authority, so City of Merritt or Burnaby or whatever it is, that operates the chauffeur permitting process. And so in order to be a company, it's a stipulation of your license to have certain requirements on that. That isn't a process that we regulate in the City of Merritt, just by virtue of size. We don't do any of the chauffeur permitting. I'm not saying that it's an impossibility, just that it's not a regime that we've currently set up. And so I think that there would be some administration that would certainly need to go into it. And then, of course, you've got the economic possibility of that. Either way, I think my gut says that seeing if potential additions to curb is what's necessary, that might be a better allocation. But I don't know that for sure because, again, if we're talking 1 o'clock in the morning, BC Transit isn't coming out and grabbing us. So they are different needs, and I'm cognizant of that. But
And it's also 24 hours required for BC Transit.
yeah, I would say as staff, we can probably do a little bit of research to find out whether that's even a feasible possibility and answer that question.
So Chris, what would the difference be between 1 o'clock in the morning, you need access to a taxi, it isn't there. If it's an emergency basis, what are the options? Call the ambulance?
Well, I know my personal experience before I got my wheelchair. Any issue that I have, if I cut myself, if I fell and hurt myself, and I needed to get to the hospital, that was the only way. Now, in order for me to get into an ambulance at that time, because I weighed 320 pounds, was for the ambulance to come, and then they would call the fire department. So now you've got 2 services attending 1 call. Whereas if they'd been a wheelchair van, taxi service, I could have just phoned them up, wheeled into the van, and gone to the hospital. So this is what this is causing, because I'm not the only one that used the ambulance to get to the hospital that are in a wheelchair. This town is growing. I've noticed a few more people in town that are in wheelchairs. So, you know, it's a growing concern. We have a lot of elderly people moving into Merritt. You know, they have health issues to deal with, disability issues. And I really think that the town of Merritt, by governing chauffeur license and then mandating that wheelchair company have a wheelchair van, would benefit the residents of Merritt. Not only for the handicapped, but even for mothers with strollers. You know, it'd be easier for them to, you know, trying to get the child out of the stroller into the cab, take the stroller down. Here they can just wheel it in. Quicker service for them to get it in. That was one of the other things I looked at. But I think it'd be beneficiary for health and services for the elderly and for the handicapped. Yeah, we go this way.
And I'm gonna ask, Mr. Smith to help us understand when ambulance calls or when fire department go on health-related calls. Can you give us a quick version?
Let me tell you all about it. Your worship, is when you're saying, is this from transporting people perspective? What is the?
When there's a call made in the middle of the night for an ambulance service or for bedridden patients, from what I understand, the fire department is usually supportive of the ambulance in situations like that for medical calls.
I think I know the answer, but I'm not confident enough in that answer to be able to assert it here. I will follow up and I'll have the fire chief provide comments on what their involvement in medical calls are, and I take it you're talking about for people where they don't have mobility themselves.
Yeah.
Is that okay? I will follow up with the fire chief and inquire.
Thank you. Councillor Banger.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, after we spoke a few weeks ago about this particular concern, I did speak to the owner of our local taxi company one, and the issue that they're having there, perhaps things have changed, is a financial concern, that they just can't seem to afford this thing. I do like the mayor's idea of perhaps looking for some type of grant to assist that business. And I'd also like to know, Sean, if you can figure this out, what it costs to, for example, the example Christopher gave, 1 in the morning, he needs to get to the hospital, ambulance shows up, fire department shows up. What's the cost attached to something like that? And how much are we spending in a year responding to these particular calls? Thank you.
Sensitive questions.
Wow.
That
Well, let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Perhaps we could just give that money to the taxi company, right?
Right.
Or something like that. What's the least expensive?
Well, yeah. I know it's the work program, work experience program that actually does the tag along with the ambulance.
I strongly suspect that fire's involvement in that is fairly minimal, in terms of transporting someone from one place to another. Again, I will confirm, but and so again, the question, it's one of the biggest problems when you look at government generally, is at the end of the day, it's all coming from some form of taxation, but it's coming from a different pot. And so here, of course, BC ambulance is funded very differently than local government operations, and so it may not be quite as easy as saying, what's the net good and how do we allocate dollars to that the best way possible. So again, not having any issue with the idea, I just want everyone to know that it's a bit more complex, I think, in terms of how we're going to find this out, but I can dig through some statistics and we'll see if there's a potential solution there that might be able to assist.
Thank you. So any other comments, questions for Ms. Brick? We will move on to Public Service Directory update. And I think the last meeting we were talking about the potential for something like that, and I just happened to pull out my 2015 edition, which is sorely in need of updates. And this is what we have so far. I don't think it's been circulated anywhere except in this little brochure for a one-time only event. So if we look at doing something like this, let's talk about the circulation and updating of it at the same time on a regular, ongoing basis. Ms. Rick, did you have any more information on this? Or,
The only information that I have in regards to it is Love West circulated, so we have the public service directory. Through our discussions at a staff level, the intent was to bring this forward so that the committee would A, be aware of it, B, make a decision as to whether there was a portion of it or all of it that we wish to possibly update. There had been discussion at the committee level to create a directory of services that were available for disabled and for seniors, and this seemed to naturally fit within that discussion.
Any comments on this or ideas?
I have a comment. Linda forwarded it to me. It was 100 pages. And so I thought, well, I'll just make some notes. Well, that they can. Linda, what are we concerned with? Just the seniors. And it's a great document. It really is. I mean, it covers everything from soup to nuts. And I really think that that is something that we could, even if it's just the seniors part and tweak it to what we need to do, we could just each take a section or whatever. Maybe that could be on one of our working meetings and update it for sure. And I think it's something that, you know, we could definitely even just have posted, you know, around town. Because I mean, I've been here 20 years and I didn't even know half the stuff that was in there. So it's a great document. So I'm for updating for sure.
Yeah.
There was funding, I think, through United Way for a one-time community directory. It was supposed to go online, I think, and through Community Services was working on it. That was a few,
I think that's
2015, probably.
that was this
That
one.
was this one.
This one.
Was it the city one?
Yeah, the problem they had was that the funding was not ongoing. So they hired their staff to do the directory, and then 6 months later, your directory's out of date because there's no ongoing funding. So that would be something maybe we could look for.
And the city has a website for things such as this. On the other hand, if it isn't updated, then it's just a nuisance. Well, not always a nuisance.
I mean, I don't think it would take long if we, you know, maybe each of us took 5 pages or something and just made phone calls. You know, because if there is a lot of, if they don't have a phone call, they've got a box number or fax, or I had to chuckle because it was all fax instead of email. Now, of course, it's email, right? But you know, I really don't think it would take too long if we just focused on the seniors and the disabled part, mental health part, and we could all just make phone calls and make, you know, create maybe one document and focus in on just the seniors.
You know, I think that there may be an opportunity for partnerships here as well, Your Worship. I don't want to be in any way presumptive, but I'm thinking of, I think the Merritt Herald has done a Golden Years edition at various points that have talked about kind of healthy living and some of the services existing in the community. As well, I think one of the main ways that you may be able to fund this on an ongoing basis, especially if it is kind of a seniors publication that's once annually, is through advertising revenue. For some of these businesses that are basically for seniors, they may have a desire to, you know, have an ad in this publication, and it might be enough to kind of fund its ongoing maintenance or however we work. So again, I'm not throwing this out as something that has to be done, but if it's done with, you know, a reasonable level of quality, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, but I will say it's simple. If we were to probably put a little bit more into it, make it a nice looking kind of brochure that is basically, here are all of the services for seniors, and sell some advertising revenue, I think you might be able to get it to where you can update it and have it be cost neutral, theoretically.
Councillor Rangoon.
Thank you, ma'am. I love that idea, Sean. It's a great idea. And it will take, you know, folks to administer it. I wonder if we should push that idea to the public, because you can make money on something like this through advertising revenue. If we don't have the manpower in the city hall to take care of it, it should be up to the public or the private sector.
Would it be possible for us to hook into, isn't it, 211 is the Provincial Directory Assistance for Health and Human Services? Is it 211? 811? Well, there's the health nurse, you know, there's all the 911, 811, all those. Well, there's a something 11 that is a provincial health and human services directory that maybe we could tap into.
I suspect Greg is madly looking.
Yeah.
Mr. Lewis.
Madly looking at writing worship, so if I can tell you that 211 is Youth Against Violence. So a very worthy number, but not the right.
Not for us.
It is all over the map. I'm seeing another one here that says 211 service to connect seniors and volunteers during the coronavirus pandemic. So I think that there's probably, yeah, that it does look like 211, maybe kind of the more recent iteration. For if you need assistance with groceries or picking something up, that's a coordinated service.
Yeah, and basically just what Sean said to clarify that the 211s, but if someone in Merritt was to call that, they'd probably get through to the CAMUS, the Interior Community Services, and it would be for things like, I think it was established in conjunction with Safe Seniors Strong Communities during the pandemic, and so yeah, it would be for things like prescription pickup, groceries, sort of urgent assistance for our seniors.
Any other thoughts on whether we go forward with this or not? Do we want to vote on this? Do we want to just agree together to do this? I don't know what the feeling in the room is. I'm sensing that it's yes, we want to do something with this. Councillor Lengu?
Yes, I think we need some type of action plan, like what direction do we want to take. I do like Susan's idea of going through this entire list and verifying who's still there. I do like Sean's idea of incorporating advertising dollars. So perhaps a workshop to figure out what direction we want to take with this might work. Any thoughts? Thank you.
Either a workshop or come up with some ideas now. Could we give it the time in this meeting? Yeah.
Is there any appetite for Sue's suggestion? Everybody in the room, I guess excepting city staff, everybody in the room takes 5 pages and starts using their dialing finger. Would there be an appetite for that?
Councillor Lengu? Oh.
I love that idea, but again, I do wonder if we're going to take the approach of incorporating advertising dollars, getting a team together, perhaps they can do all of that work. And if we do decide to shoot it out to a private individual who can make some money off of this, then they can do all the work. So I don't know, like, do we want to create this thing or do we want to shoot it out? Thank you.
Councillor Fury, would you like to? And then I'll go to him.
Yeah, I was just going to say that my feeling is that probably for long term, if we can establish some kind of a system that's advertised and paid for with it, but I don't picture exactly how that would work. You would get it done and everything, but it takes some. Oh, okay.
I would definitely be in support of working with the group to establish this, whichever group you decide if it's paid. But I just wanted to suggest that there's also somebody that looks into adding new services that weren't in existence back then. So.
Yeah, it's more than just calling what's on the list, and I agree with Amanda. It's also collating it, which
could be paid for by advertising dollars. On the other hand, there's something that we need to do on an ongoing basis as well. So there has to be something working that keeps it updated. And there has to be some body, such as the city or ICS, that takes this on. Because if we just do it and leave it there, it's gonna be like this one, a beautiful one-time only shot and nothing else. Ellen?
The only thing with the advertising part, so you have 100 people that will pay for the advertising, and what about the other 100 that can't afford it, but they want their name in here? Is it fair to just, for only advertising customers?
I'm gonna turn that back to Mr. Smith, because I think his idea was a little different than that.
Yeah, I think that, I completely agree. I think that it needs to be a comprehensive listing, so everybody that has anything to do with, here it's all public service, but if it was narrowed down to something that was seniors only, I do think that one thing that should be decided today is deciding whether this is going to be a kind of all for the benefit of everybody in the city of Merritt, but you're advancing this because it has particular importance for seniors and the disabled, or whether we're only talking about creating a guide or a booklet that is dedicated and specific for seniors and the disabled. I think that knowing that scope at the very least today would definitely help. But I think the idea would be that in that brochure showing what all of the services are, there can be, special eye-catching advertisements that people may be interested in purchasing that would perhaps go along with it, or be in addition to kind of the basic or generic information that you would see. I'm not saying that this is going to be a huge moneymaker either. I don't think, somebody's going to take it as necessarily a private venture that is going to make them rich. I think that this is much more likely to be kind of a public service where there's a partner that is willing to assist and contribute and coordinate some of that out of the goodness of their hearts, and perhaps receive some token amount of revenue to be able to justify the work that would go into coordinating all this.
Gail?
Yes, I think that if we're going to do it, and if there is a public service directory, I think it should be all inclusive, and because that's really should benefit the whole community. And I do think that it has to be something that has to be reviewed, whether it's annually or every second year or something, but it has to be ongoing. So.
Kira? What she said. So let's have a poll. Those that want all-inclusive, those that want seniors only. Let's do all-inclusive. And seniors only is nobody. Okay, so we know it's all-inclusive.
So I know we probably haven't got this far in the discussion, but this is a hard copy. And if we were to update this in some form or fashion, should it not be updated to be web-based? And I'm thinking that if we do the legwork to update what we already have here, whether that's reaching out to the people who are there, or, are you still the person in charge of this organization or whatever, it would be nice to be able to update that in real time rather than making notes and handing them off to someone. So I don't know who is responsible for this original document. I did have a hard copy at one time, but I have no idea where it came from or where it might live digitally.
I think it's with ICS, but Mr. Smith?
Your Worship, what I think, I want to create as clear a boundary as possible that's going to make this easy for the committee. I think if the committee is willing to verify existing information and seek out any new information, so gather and collate the content, whether it's through staff time or a partnership or finding some grant funding to put it together, we on the staff end can probably look for the right avenue to put this out and collate the information. So if you guys will gather it, we'll find some mechanism to get the information out in a cost-effective manner.
And is there also a way we can look at the news through either business permits? Is there some way to?
Our licensing data is somewhat limited. There's a small, short description of what the business does.
So it wouldn't be all inclusive.
Yeah, and it's not going to cover a lot of the societies anyways, and so I would be hesitant to trust that database. In all honesty, what I think you're going to be better off doing is instead of taking it by page, if there's 2 sections that one person is, all right, I'm on churches or whatever it is, and somebody just, asks around, talks to people, I think that if you kind of become an expert in that one niche area, I think that that is going to be a more effective way of gathering information because, one person will know a little bit who will lead you to the next person who will lead you to the next person. And if you do the same thing with, each category, I think that will likely work. We can see what we have for city data, but I'm not hugely convinced it's going to be helpful in this, Your Worship. You agree, Don? I'm not going to do primarily for this.
And what about chamber? Would any society be part of chamber that's more of a business?
Yeah, and particularly where that's it's a voluntary membership as well. I think that you're not like you may not get some information, but the problem is some information in some respects is almost more problematic because you don't know what's not there. But it could be of some use.
Yeah, I think we've agreed that there is some useful purpose to doing this. But maintaining it is time limited because it was back in 2015, this was a beautiful vision. And
I'm going to ask, do we only have this in PDF form? Do we even have it in PDF form as city staff?
We have the hard copy and
that's
we
it.
have a scanned PDF. That's what we have.
Okay, we'll also work to see if we can't get in touch with the original creators of the document, see if we can find any form of digital start, because realistically, even if we're taking this information and just beautifying it, it would be sure nice if we could have it where we could circulate this out to you. And how many of you have any familiarity with how to use, word processing and track changes? No, we'll have you send us the changes. Bad question. My bad. Yeah. Okay.
so we are looking at taking a few pages each, doing what we can, bringing the information back to city staff so that staff can figure out how to do that pretty stuff to it. Linda?
I can follow up with each of the members individually after the meeting to find out which sections or which pages they would like to work on.
That would be perfect. Thank you. Gail, did you have another comment?
No.
Okay. Your button is still on, that's why.
Oh, sorry.
Just one last resource that might be helpful if we were working on the health resource section is the Pathways website, Pathways Merit. Now it does cover other areas in BC, and I'm not extremely familiar with how to navigate that database, but I know that it's divided into different sections as well. So that's like counseling services, it would have a list of every counseling service available. And I'm not aware that to kind of reviews and updates that information, but it might be a good starting point for those that are working on specifically health, well-being, or health type services.
And to the legal peoples in the room, would there be any potential liability for putting in, I don't know, if I decide I'm a counselor tomorrow and I take somebody on and we found them in this brochure, and I'm technically not a counselor. There is going to be just a directory, there is no follow-up or potential for liability. I know you can't give us advice. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Your Worship. With that caveat heavily in place, I think as city staff, we would be very comfortable putting together a directory addressing these are businesses or organizations who profess to offer the merit without us making any assumptions about the quality of service they provide.
Thank you. Any other comments on this, Ava?
Just to say, and in fact, Your Worship, you could hang out your shingle tomorrow as a counselor. It's not a protected title. You don't have to have any training, and you don't even have to be a real person.
Enter the age of romance.
Okay, so have we exhausted this? We can move on to the review of the age-friendly action items, and there are no items.
Thank you, Your Worship. If you want to turn my mic on, I shouldn't turn it off every time. Today, we're on the third portion of the age-friendly action plan recommendations. And if you could just zoom in on that a little bit, Greg, so that there's some chance we'll be able to see. Yeah, I know. Reading so overrated. So this third section is on housing. I'm really glad to have Dawn here today because she'll be able to fill in some of these cracks. But what you're going to find overall as we go through each of these recommendations, we've got much of the policy structure in place that encourages much of these recommendations. We have contemplated but have not yet implemented some of the additional incentives for some of these. And then there are others that there hasn't been really any discussion or movement on. So we'll start with 3.1, which is to lobby for more subsidized assisted living options within the city. One thing that I can say is we have been very successful. I think BC Housing has been, they've been quite frankly a great partner. They have frequent conversations with Mr. MacArthur in relation to a number of different projects that they're looking at and are considering. Very recently, you guys would be familiar with the announcement of the second phase of the Ask Wellness building, which is dedicated seniors housing in our community, which again directly counts as a result of provincial funding. So there have been successes in our community on this front that we're very, very happy with. And there's more around the corner, whether it's all exclusively seniors or it's various forms of affordable housing, which would also be available to seniors. These options are coming. Do you have anything you want to add on that one, Bob?
No, that's a pretty good overview. We're constantly having conversations with BC Housing, and they've indicated that they want to continue offering their support to the city and working with the city.
Dawn, can I have you pull your mic, please? Sorry, share Julie's mic, please. Thank you.
All right, so as Mr. Smith mentioned, we're in constant communication with BC Housing, and they've indicated that they would like to continue their support with the city and help us move projects forward. Of course, there are several BC Housing funded projects that have been moving forward in recent times, so including the building on Busha, as Mr. Smith mentioned. So we're planning to continue that communication with BC Housing and see where it can take us.
Any questions for Mr. McCarthy? We have a number of development applications at different stages of the game right now. So it's a lot of stages to get to before we see the foundations go in.
Yeah, particularly where there is rounds of funding that they apply for long before it actually gets to the building stage. It's a competitive world right now in applications through BC Housing or CMHC or wherever the funds come through. And so we have been fortunate to have societies and groups that are attracting funding to merit, which again, we're hugely grateful for those what I see as partnerships in the community, because they don't happen without the societies who are driving that. So we're very grateful for it, and for council's support every time UBCM comes around. I know housing is one of the things you're frequently advocating for. So.
And Peter.
Is anything happening around educating the public with regards to the BC housing things coming? I'm moving in on Springbank shortly, and have been getting to know my neighbors who are really thrilled and pleased with the city having moved forward to approve the application there on the end of Springbank. And that was, you probably couldn't tell because of my mask, that was sarcasm.
I was going to say, wow, this is news to me.
Yeah. News to you how thrilled my neighbors are?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me, listening to folks talk, I come from a bit different perspective than they do, but with some education, they might have been very much on board with that development. And I was wondering if there's anything happening around that. I know you can't just go zap with your magic wands and make us all enlightened, but is the city doing anything?
In terms of dedicated campaigns for how we would communicate that out, I don't think that there's been huge amounts. There was a lot that happened during the public hearing process, so anyone that was tuning into the public hearings would have seen a whole lot of information coming from provincial sources, coming from the society itself. Actually had a really well put together 20-minute video talking about the impacts for their community on what this would do. So there is information that was made available through the public processes, but in terms of trying to use that as a more far-reaching educational opportunity, I don't believe that there was any coordinated effort done that front.
I think a lot of times, David, it's opinion. People do want it or they don't want it, and it doesn't matter what we say, they still maintain the opinion that they do or don't want it. There's rumors flying galore about what is to happen and what isn't going to happen, and so far what we've looked at is zoning changes only. And that's one thing we can't seem to get across to the public, is that we're looking at a piece of land zoning in at council level. It's not just the looks of the development or things that we look at after the fact. What we have to see that piece of property for is it the right piece of property or isn't it? And the rest of it falls into our zoning bylaws and other development issues. So these are emotionally charged opinions that are really, I don't know that there's an education component to it. I don't know how to do that. Mr. Smith?
To the extent that there is, I think that where it's not development specific, I think that that's much more viable and probably healthy for the community to understand, what are the impacts of this type of housing versus this type of housing. There's some really good information that is available, and I think that we've actually talked about that as part of the official community plan process, because that's a lot of what we hear. And quite honestly, I would say Merritt is at a really unique crossroads right now. And there's many people who have been here for a long time that feel that their community is changing in a way that they're not happy with. And then there's lots of people who feel like, wow, what a great place to be. I'm so excited to come to Merritt, and I'm liking these changes. And so there's some polar positions there, and I don't want to, so long as those polar positions are respectfully presented, I think that we're all very comfortable with that. But I do think that there is an opportunity to share out some of the kind of general uncontroverted fact about how certain housing types and certain types of developments contribute to a community in a certain way, and other ones. And that could be whether we're talking water or taxation or proximity to amenities, or there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can view these. But there probably is more opportunity for public education than what we've historically undergone, in my opinion. So long as it's general. The specific stuff is, yeah, I don't want to touch that.
No.
And, yeah, and just one point to add to that, we did work with the TNRD to create a housing needs report, and that was accepted by council earlier this year. And we did make a lot of effort to get the word out to the community and to get the local media to pick up on that. And certainly we've created a dedicated webpage on our website and put it out through social media. And so we did as much as we could to advertise that document, which is an assessment of all of the challenges around housing, specifically around affordable housing, but just housing in general. And also it has recommended actions in the plan that the city would be working to implement over the coming years and working with other partners, whether it be BC Housing and nonprofit organizations, et cetera, as well as developers. So one thing is to create an education plan, and the other is that, you know, we need the local media to help us with that as well. And so there was a little bit of coverage of that, but not nearly enough probably, but we are trying to do as much education as we can. So.
And the housing needs report, for anyone who's interested, is on our website somewhere.
Yeah.
It's under Living in Merit,
Yeah.
Projects and Programs. Thank you.
And would anybody, if anybody would like or would be beneficial, we can send it out directly to the members of this committee as well, because again, is when we get this information, we find it very valuable. It becomes a guiding document for city council and city staff. And so when other community leaders have that, understand that they're talking about that as well, it's hugely helpful for us.
That would be a good idea to send it out. And, please.
Yep, we can take
Anyone
care
who
of that.
doesn't want it, that's fine too. So back to the plan.
Okay, next on up, 3.2 is to promote the creation of new affordable housing units or innovative housing forms through incentives like reduced development cost charges, basement suite or development secondary suite grant initiatives. What I would say is our legislation was not very supportive of alternative forms of housing historically, and so this actually felt like it was 2 jumps ahead of where we were when this plan initially came out. We're now at step 1, where many of these new or more affordable housing forms are possible. There's reduced regulation that would allow for basically greater infill. So parcels that could historically only have perhaps 1 unit on them may be able to have 2 units, carriage homes, legislation that would allow for smaller home sizes on smaller lot sizes that have historically existed. So we feel a lot more content as a result of the zoning bylaw that's in place, but we haven't yet explored in any real fashion any additional incentives for housing on that front.
We also, I think previous council made a concerted effort not to look at the whole problem we have with illegal suites or basement suites or what have you until we have adequate housing in place. So we have not been doing bylaw enforcement of illegal suites, and we will not be doing that until there's enough of a inventory out there to be able to be useful to the one that's being thrown on the street. Ms. Bloom?
Yes, I just wanted to address basement suites. In Summerland, what they did was they just made it the zoning for the whole town. Anybody can have a basement suite. So they did away with having to worry about illegal suites. So they just zoned it so that you could do that, right? And it really was beneficial because a lot of people that did put basement suites in, and they didn't have to,
Mhm.
You did away with all that stuff.
And I think this is one of the misconceptions that comes in when we talk about illegal suites, because there's illegal from the zoning perspective, which we are by and large really taking a step back from. We're very supportive with the legislation that we have right now. But the zoning is different than the building code requirements. And so what we see some of is you've got a basement suite, but you've got something that doesn't have any windows, which are required for egress, or the electrical is shoddily connected. And there's some real issues from a health and safety perspective. And so what we've tried to do is make it so housing is going to be as broadly available from a legislative perspective as possible. But the day is going to come, because we have a number of them in the city of Merritt, where we are going to need to address what we see as health and safety concerns with the quality of some of the housing. And so if that doesn't get us out of that particular issue, but there are many programs that other communities have released where they give owners, sufficient periods of time, whether it's 6 months or 12 months, to come into compliance with this. We will waive the fees, perhaps as some other communities have done it, for the process to convert. Anybody who doesn't convert after this time, the fees aren't going to get waived, and there'll be tickets if we find out about it. And so there are kind of community transition projects, but as Mayor Brown said, it's difficult if there isn't sufficient housing when you implement initiatives like that. What happens is you have Meritonians that don't have anywhere to go, and so they start looking outside the community. And so these have been real challenges for communities across BC, and it's been this way now for at least 5 years. So.
But we're hoping to get there someday soon. Any comments on
Mr. MacArthur's got.
Mr. MacArthur?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just as an add-on to what Sean said, we're actually now one of the more progressive cities in BC with regard to zoning for secondary suites. In the fall of 2019, the province changed their regulation, or their legislation, to allow secondary suites in duplexes and townhomes. But cities themselves had to enact that, and as of September 1st, Merritt did that. So when council adopted the new zoning bylaw, we now allow secondary suites in all single-family zones, all duplex zones, and all townhome zones. So that's very progressive. Not a lot of cities have done that. So so on the zoning side, we've made those changes, but as Mr. Smith mentioned, it's the building code that's the challenge, because you want to make sure that there's proper egress and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. With respect to other forms, another thing that we did in the new zoning bylaw was make it easier for carriage homes or laneway homes. So it used to be very difficult for people to build carriage homes or laneway houses because of the regulations around parcel coverage and setbacks and all of that. But those regulations were eased, and so now a lot more property owners have the ability to build laneway houses or carriage homes in the city. So that's another form of alternate housing that could become more common in the future. And then, of course, as Mr. Smith mentioned as well, around infill housing. So now a lot of properties, especially in the R2 zone, so in Diamond Vale, in West Merritt, and Collettville, those properties now a lot of them have the ability to subdivide. So you could have potentially where an owner subdivides and builds more housing. So there's also no minimum requirement for square footage for housing in the community. So that means that you could build smaller housing, which is more affordable by its nature. So yeah, there's quite a few things that we did in the new zoning bylaw that makes it so that there's the possibility of more affordability, but of course that now is on property owners to move forward with some of those things. And right now, of course, it's a bit of a challenge with building material prices. A lot of property owners are having a second thought about whether they want to build that laneway house right now, but hopefully those prices will come down post-COVID. So.
These are the realities we can't get away from.
Laneway houses are shops.
Yeah, that's right.
Any other comments? Seeing none, can we move on to the next item?
Next one is to create and maintain a local seniors housing directory to include the rates, availability, amenities, etc. I Again, I think that if this is going to happen, this would probably be a natural connection with the project that you already have ongoing for houses. The only caveat that I would have to this is they're dead right when you're talking about if you're going to have things like rates and availability, this has got to be a way more actively managed document than what we're talking about on a once-a-year basis. So perhaps it could be a project carried out by the same team in the same area, but I think it would probably still be its own beast if it were to be undertaken.
May only require on our document a link to the other person's website for rates rather than us doing rates here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you create the linkage there and have it where one is more actively managed. If this is something that the committee would like to see move forward, would like to be champions of and figure out how you can implement, I think this is probably a good project to tackle, but I'll leave that up to the committee's purview there. Provide assistance for home renovation and adaptation through grants. Much as I said with 3.2, and you'll see it again when it comes up here, haven't had too much by way of incentive programs for these just yet. There's been some for businesses and facade and things like that, but for private residences, it hasn't happened. So
There was a federal grant out recently that talks about up to 40,000, zero interest for
5,000.
5,000 grant, but there's also a loan program for
Yeah, thank you, Roshan. I was going to mention that that the federal government announced a program for $5,000 to help homeowners, where you have an energy efficiency expert come in and do an evaluation of your home, and then if you qualify, they'll reimburse the homeowner after the fact. We also are going to be bringing forward a building bylaw update to council later this year, because the BC Energy Step Code is required to be implemented by the end of the year. And so that's a major project that staff have to undertake. There could be some opportunities to align those types of things. As well, we're doing, of course, the official community plan update. So if council and the committee were wanting to see some sort of incentives for property owners, whether it be around accessibility issues or if it be around energy efficiency, in the case of the step code, et cetera, then that would be a good opportunity to sort of dovetail the building bylaw update potentially with that.
This is one of the challenges for a lot of these is there are certain things that flow through very well from the local government level, but as it stands so far, most of these types of programs have been individuals applying directly to senior levels of government, which often is quite a barrier. We see the levels of uptake on those types of programs to be quite often not even just a little bit lower, they're a lot lower than, let's say, if they were to say, direct that money to the local government and the local government were to direct or create a program. So I'm not saying that that isn't a possibility moving forward. I've heard more whispers that, and we've actually already started to see it in other areas with COVID funding that's come through right now, where there's funding being directed to the local governments to be able to look at how it can be distributed in the communities. So it might be the case that for future upcoming grants, we will see a growing trend towards them being supportive of applications that are basically just us acting as a flow through and creating our own grant program for $100,000 or $200,000 that would then be distributed in the community. But today it hasn't happened too much on the housing side. It's still mostly direct to the senior levels of government.
And that's something we've all said that one day we'll get there. Well, I've said that. Maybe not.
Yeah, and it's one of the areas where here's an area where it probably does make sense for the local government to be designing a program. They're going to have more know for where the need is in their community. And then there's other times where it feels like the senior levels of government will ask us to do something that we know almost nothing about, and we're asked to be the experts on it. Let's say, I think water and flood management is a very classic example of that. We don't have any hydrologists on staff that are experts in these areas, but there's been a delegation of authority there. But let me tell you, I think the council is absolutely the expert here in terms of, where there's housing need in the community and how those funds could be distributed. So I think that we're just trying to work with them and put in our comments wherever we can, where we can readjust that perceived misalignment. So, would you like me to move on to the next one, Your Worship?
Yes, please, but I'm not sure which one we're.
3.5. Create and distribute an aging in place housing checklist for older residents to promote self-evaluation of existing dwelling and awareness of future housing needs. I've actually seen other communities that have implemented tools like this, and I think that this one is probably low-hanging fruit in terms of the ability to take some, high-quality documents that are out there if there are certain meritisms that we need to attach. But by and large, these checklists are fairly generic. Did you think of, do you have hand railings in your bathtubs? Do you have X, Y, Z? What about your pathway up to the house? Do you have lifted cement tiles? And there's different things that they will walk through you with, and in a couple-hour period, you can have had a whole kind of self-assessment of your home and the things that you may need to address to make your home as friendly for aging in place as possible. So again, I think that if this is a project that the committee would like to take on, I think that one is much easier than many of the other ones that we've talked about.
So what is the wish of this committee? Low-hanging fruit. Councilor Fair.
Yeah, so I have done some preliminary or surface review of that kind of thing too, and I've seen some of the things that Mr. Smith was referring to. Other communities have such kind of checklists, so I agree that there's probably something established pretty easily. So I would say we should go with that.
We meeting staff, right? And that is what we meant.
Well, yeah, maybe they can direct us to some choices, and the committee can review them and come up with identify things that need to be tailored towards merit.
Ms. Bloom? And I'll go back to.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably a valuable thing to do, and I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just can use other examples and compile it and toss up what we don't want or whatever, and I think it wouldn't take much time at all. I think it's a valuable tool.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if you're totally figured out, Your Worship, but what I would say is anything that the committee does, we will distribute, build a campaign for how we can communicate that out. We'll integrate it into the web pages, and we could probably do a whole bunch of beautification and different things to make sure it fits the branding and a bunch of other points. But I really, as much as it sounds like I'm a broken record, I really do want to see the committee have the opportunity to be able to pick the projects and kind of guide them to at least the point where we can action it.
Okay. So are you wanting motions from us to going ahead with some of these things, or how do you want me to address it? Or just
As staff, I don't want anything. You're the one that but I think that it would be sensible if to create motions on the things that the committee is going to do, and then ideally you would identify somebody who is going to play project lead and perhaps pick 2 other individuals to assist them. They can have a conversation about how to move forward with that. And again, if there's a need for resources, we can probably send them, but I can promise that we would be doing the exact same thing committee members would be, and it would be a Google search and looking at other PDF documents and coordinating which ones we think are relevant, and then we can actually put the document together so long as the committee's got what they want.
So we're looking for a motion for 3.5 and somebody who wants to move it, second it. Dean, a second. And do we want to speak to this at all? And, okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, nobody opposed, so it's carried.
So just to clarify for the minutes, because I never want to walk away from a meeting without having a resolution firm. So what's happened is that item 3.5 has been moved and carried, and you're directing staff to bring back options, or are we having members of the committee bring forward options?
I thought we were asking staff to look at the options.
Just to clarify that. for the minutes of the staff.
I'm glad you're clarifying because I didn't know that. Yeah.
Very vague.
So, okay, I mean, realistically, this one's short enough that if you want us to do it, we can, yeah, I'm not gonna fight it. That works just
And
fine.
then bring it back to us.
Sure.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you for making me clarify. It was really clear to all the rest of the committee.
That's right.
Did you have a comment?
Your Worship, the public service directory, did we need a motion on that?
That thought crossed my mind a little bit as well, because we didn't do a
We
motion.
didn't do a motion.
We took a poll.
In the minutes, I've noted that the direction of the committee, that the poll, and what the poll reflected, and what you guys would like.
Okay,
So that's
so
what
we're not
we-
gonna back up and do another motion on that. Good, thank you. I'll try to clarify a little bit the next time. No promises, but I'll try. Mr. Smith.
Very good, Your Worship. 3.6 is to promote the conversion of unoccupied spaces above shops into housing units through methods such as development grants or tax reductions to owners. This is something the council has talked about fairly extensively. And again, the linchpin here was that we didn't really have zoning that allowed for a whole lot of mixed-use space to start with. So this is going to tie in very closely with what you'll see as 3.7, which is incentivizing the creation of mixed-use developments, which is commercial on the bottom and residential on top. Why those two didn't get mixed into one, I'm not 100% sure, but it's really what it's talking about is incentivizing mixed-use space. We all recognize that particularly in downtowns, for a revitalized healthy downtown, that's a critical approach. And so, as it stands right now, we have a fairly broad tax revitalization exemption that I think is probably the first candidate up for renewal for better targeting residential above commercial. We've done some very preliminary research as staff as to how we could support that. But a lot of this started with the fact that historically tax revitalization exemptions have been capitalized primarily by businesses and most especially in industrial developments. There's been very little that has gone to residential developments. And so hearing council's feedback that you would like more of that to be going toward residential, as well as have that ideally focused on the downtown core first and foremost. When we bring forward the recommendation to repeal this tax revitalization exemption bylaw, which is going to be coming forward very soon, we will also be seeking direction from council to have us create a new tax revitalization exemption bylaw that would have this as one of its focuses.
And I have a question for Mr. McCarthy. I thought we couldn't touch DCCs. I thought DCCs were something that we couldn't attach a reduction to.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is a provision in the Local Government Act that allows us, if we so choose, to have an exemption or a reduction for affordable housing. So that is something we can explore when we update the development cost charges bylaw.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to add, it has to be expressly set out in your development cost charge bylaw. And so when we say we can't, it's because right now we don't have the local authority, but the legislation allows for it. And so it would be a local legislation change. But you can't do it for anything that is outside of, I shouldn't say anything. It's a very narrow list of things outside of affordable housing that you can reduce development cost charges for.
Okay, thank you.
The last on the list, Your Worship, is to consider partnerships with Nicola Valley Institute of Technology for affordable maintenance and renovation services, which is tradesman work. So I know that this is something that the committee once again had talked about, and I think that to some extent, it's not necessarily called tradesperson work, but ICS has this as a component of its mandate. Is that correct, Amanda?
It is part of some better home programs. As far as, let's say, on our list of implementing services, it's sort of a little bit far down the list. It's not something that's going to maybe be in place in the short term. And then it would be not so much related to tradesperson work, but general maintenance, like painting or changing light bulbs, or it wouldn't be something that there may be some liability attached to, because it most likely, again, volunteers could do that kind of work.
And from what I understand, this, having a handyman, handywoman, whatever, that actually does tiny projects for seniors is what seniors really desperately need. Most of the people who are into business for contracting or trades or whatever, they do the big jobs. And that's where they get their money. So the idea that they take time to come to a senior's home for an hour is, or whatever it takes, is not, it's a special kind of person that actually sets themselves up to do that. And it's not all of the tradespeople that do it. So maybe there is something here in terms of NVIT students that can maybe make money on the side, but a liability issue, and then there's criminal record checks. But it may be possible to look at. The seniors I've talked to, almost all of them have issues with trying to get somebody into their house to do some tiny little toilet leak or not big rentals. They're not looking for big rentals, just small repairs. So if there's anything we can do with this, it would be helpful. Amanda, were you?
Oh, no,
Okay. Chris?
Right now, the BC government has a program where you go and pay the contractor to come in and change your bathroom over, your kitchen over, build a ramp, whatever, for accessibility, and then they'll reimburse you. But the question is whether you're born disabled or you're in an accident because of work or at home or a car accident, and now all of a sudden you're disabled. You've lost all that money that you've made before as income in order to afford something like this, which makes it even hard. And I'm trying to get them to change that. I'm working on it right now. But through my worker, the Nicola Valley Institute of Technology, she was able to get the carpentry class to come in and raise my deck so it would be at the door level and build a proper ramp. And they did this at all their cost. So like all the materials that were needed for this, it was all through MDIT. They came in, they did everything. I was blessed. I couldn't thank them enough. You know, it just made my life, the fact that I could go up and down that ramp easier, not fall off the Mickey Mouse one that my friend built me. And the fact that I didn't have to come up a ramp and go like this and go up another ramp and then turn around like this, you know, now it's just bang, I'm in. It's just so much simple. And I didn't have to spend a dime. And that was a great thing. I didn't have to come with money first and then hope to be reimbursed later. That was a good thing. So the fact that Nicola Valley Institute of Technology carpentry class did this, it's wonderful. And I have to thank my worker Marilyn for doing it as well. You know, she was the one that stepped forward and said, okay, can we find someone to do this? And she found that. So yeah, Nicola Valley, like someone that gets injured and all of a sudden they need kitchen sink fluid, you know, maybe it could be the plumbing class or the carpentry class that could do it, you know. And what about the students at high school? Don't they have a carpentry class there?
So how would we as this group, start out partnering with NBIT if that was even possible to partner? I'm not even sure how I can see the seniors group partnering with NBIT, and maybe that's where we have to move. I think the city's the right partner at this point. Councilor Van.
Yes, thank you. Chris, you mentioned something interesting, how there's money out there, but first you have to have money to access that money. And I wonder if the city can perhaps set some sort of fund up where we provide the money on certain cases where, you know, it seems like we'll get the money back from the government. Sean, has the city's done that before in the past? Are these things options? Thank you.
Outside of setting up forms of grant programs, which again is historically there hasn't been a whole lot of local governments setting up their own grants, at least not in communities of our size.
Or loans? I guess it would be a loan.
It isn't. I don't want to say that it can't be done. It hasn't typically been done, though. No.
We've talked about this, I think, on a previous council, and part of the rationale was, what do we do with a loan if not paid back? You can't put it on taxes, but if it's not the landlord that's asking for renovations, then we can't attach it to their taxes at any point. There's a lot of ifs.
Yeah, and generally speaking, when things like this come up, they're not small. To redo that deck, that's not an insignificant expense. And so oftentimes, if we were to say set up some kind of reasonable fund, it would go to a fairly small number of projects, which anytime you're in local government land, a pot of money that goes to very few people tends to not end very well for anybody that's been around it. You want to have projects and plans that are going to support as much of the public as possible. And so I think that's part of the reason why local governments haven't been heavily involved in these types of initiatives in the past. I never like closing the door on ideas, especially at the brainstorming phase. So the last thing I wanted to do is to say, no, it's not possible. But I can think of a few barriers that would make this problematic, at least at the outset, that we would need to work through.
Eva?
Your worship, just backing up to the question of partnering with NBIT, kind of one before this one. I think all it would take is a member of the committee being willing to go up, raise it, go talk to Ken Turan and say, is this something that you could see as being advantageous to NBIT? And he says, yes, go talk to. And that's the person you go talk to, and particularly if NBIT were having some kind of credit, public credit for their trades crews coming in and doing this kind of work. I think that I could see them being very interested in it. So I think that's all we need is a member of the committee willing to go talk to them. You can move the talk.
Give it a shot.
Go ahead, Eva. I'm not sure. If the committee wants it done, I'll go talk.
And I don't have an issue with any committee member talking to NBIT and NBIT IT setting up a program like this. I just wonder where the city fits in that program, in that partnership, because I can see it with the seniors, but I'm not so sure I can see it ongoing with the city. I may be wrong.
Does it have to be though?
Yeah.
I mean, can that not just be a seniors and a NBIT thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the city doesn't have to.
You don't have to have your finger in that particular pie.
Right. And if it works between the other two organizations, more power to the city, or community.
The only place I can see where the city sometimes does get involved, where it doesn't always make sense, is if every once in a while there are grant funding opportunities that are available to municipalities that aren't available to other institutions. So let's say there was a grant funding opportunity that was for seniors that perhaps a public education institution didn't have access to. Sometimes we would be an applicant on something and be a flow-through party that said even if all of the funding at the end of the day was going to go to NBIT to support this program, there have been times where cities have gotten involved from that perspective just to make sure that we are able to access the grant funding. And I think that that would make good sense if those opportunities arise. But I am with you that in terms of kind of city mandate, I think that whoever is ultimately going to be the provider of the services and the residents directly, or if it's a association that the seniors would go to that would coordinate it for them, something along those
I'm
lines.
just saying there's enough red tape in the system already that
Yeah.
to have the city involved in one more thing that really doesn't have to be. But yes, we'd be available for any kind of grant funding. If that's the silent partner kind of position that we would take, that's absolutely fine. So you're gonna check that out?
I'll check it out and not make any promises.
You know,
Sounded like a politician all day.
There's a seven switch.
okay. So we're looking into that.
And that's it for the housing portion, Your Worship. Next on up for next meeting will be social participation.
Okay. Anybody have anything that needs to be discussed at this point in time before we terminate? Gail?
Well, what I was wanting to just bring forward for maybe for us to think about is with the amount of people that are moving in, new people that are moving into Merritt, and there's been quite a few in far. I know there's still quite a wait list in all the doctor's offices, and I've heard it's a 5-year wait list, and that's just for people who live here, not the new ones that are arriving, and we're getting more and more all the time. Is this something that we need to be concerned about? Because I believe that the majority of people that are moving in tend to be in more of the senior category. So it's something that I think is a big concern for this community, and what are we going to do about getting more doctors, and how, is there something we can do, or is there anything we can do?
You obviously have read what I put on the Facebook regarding,
No,
okay.
I'm not on Facebook.
Oh, okay. I did respond to a couple of them talking about the issue of doctors that you're very familiar with. They're not IHA employees. They don't hire them. They don't send them to our community. A doctor comes into our community because he chooses to have a business in this community, and he applies for privileges at the hospital. He is not an employee at the hospital. He is not paid by the hospital. So some staff doctors are paid positions, but not the ones that come and do what the GP doctors that we have here. The other thing with IHA is they're looking at having a minimum of about 12,000 to 15,000 before they actually believe that we will need extra services. So there's that issue as well. If we don't grow, we're not going to get them. A doctor, when I went to a conference about 6 years ago on locums and physicians and whatever it was, it talked about the business plan that the doctor pretty well has in mind when he goes to a community. It's one doctor for every 2,000 patients. Well, if we start looking at our numbers, we have about 8,000. 4 physicians would do it. That's 4 full-time physicians. Physicians are now restricted to how many patients they can see through the medical plan. They're only allowed to have so many patients a day and then they're cut off. So they don't see 12 hours with the patients anymore. That's in their office. They can also go out to Emerge and see them up there. So over the last 20 years or so, we've been using Emerge as a form of, not just here, this is across Canada, using Emerge as a form of walking clinic. And it's been hard for hospitals and emergencies to say, we can't use them for walking clinics anymore because there are no physicians in the community. So it's really a catch-22, but it's trying to get a physician to come into this community that looks at the community and says, how many physicians do we have now? And I want to go there and make how much? So it's really a matter of numbers in our community. And the same kind of thing with why don't we have maternity at the hospital anymore? Well, these physicians have to have so many babies that they deliver a year in order to be competent. And if they can't deliver 30 to 40 or whatever each per year, they don't get their license for it. So there's a whole bunch of issues involved. It's not always IEJ, it's the local physicians. So, and there's also times when a new physician has come into town and the docs have gotten together and moved them on. Because that's been happening over the years because they're cutting into their base. So it's not a matter of IHA just throwing money at this and us saying, please bring more physicians. It's not going to happen that way. And I say this because I was a hospital administrator at one time, so I'm a little bit familiar with the system. So, Gail, how about you?
Yes, and I think, I understand all that, but what I was thinking was if we can make it more attractive somehow from our perspective for the doctors to maybe want to come here, and I know that sometimes they do come here. We have a dentist that bought a practice here, but he lives in Kamloops, right, because they don't want to live in a small town. Things like that, there's that kind of attitude that we have to deal with too. The 8,000 the number 8,000 you talked about, yeah, that's merit proper. But we have a big outlying area, and I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,000.
So does local aid,
Yeah,
so does the Aboriginal community.
that's right.
And we can't count them twice.
No, but they do use the doctors here, so that is a factor.
It can be.
Yes, the other thing was, I believe there was a committee that was struck a few years back to look at walk-in clinic. And they were wanting to somehow build their own right outside of IHA, and IHA squashed it all because they said they were going to be building one shortly. Well, it's not here. So there's some issues here that we need to really look at.
Councillor Gustafson and myself are trying to get in touch with physicians here to see if we can look at even just detox healing, get some addictions, things going on here, more counseling or something.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of trying to meet with physicians, so it's difficult. Here, we've got potential to be able to use the hospital land here without IHA's approval because it's the foundation's land, it's not IHA's land. So we've got that ability to say we can have the land, and the foundation has said if you put a detox and healing center on this land, they would approve it. The problem is they also have to initiate the desire to have a detox center here in there. We've tried, but we're getting nowhere with mental health. They say go through IHA. Ellen,
Actually,
let me contact Ellen first.
sure.
Thank you, Your Worship. Another thing we have to consider is with the quarantine closing the critical care floor, we have got a lot of seniors coming in that have got no doctors.
Another issue, complex care beds through the quarantine are private beds. They are not IHA beds. They are the province's beds. So when the Florentine gets closed, IHA isn't going to automatically replace them.
No.
So this is, they will tell us that they will try their best to move the patients around, but we know that the patients are going elsewhere because we just don't have the room there. IHA isn't gonna automatically just buy the second floor off Florentine. We know that as well. But I agree, it's a,
Their plan is to move everybody to Kamloops. It's terrible.
it is terrible. And I don't know what we can do about it.
I have a mother and a mother-in-law there right now, and they really have no plan.
And that's only part of the issue with Toronto Conference. There's also the ones in assisted living that had the hopes of moving into complex care, and there's no option for them there. So I'm not sure what the issues are, but Kurt, myself, we're trying to get Dr. Ross and know who else is going to be involved, but we're going to look at the issues to see what can we do, if there's anything. I mean, I've talked with the VP of Clinical Services. I've talked to a number of individuals within IHA to say, we want these beds kept in the community, but they finally said to me, talk to the public health officer, that's the one that has to say. And maybe that's where we have to go. But IHA looks after these patients on a functional basis only. They don't own the building, they don't pay for the services, they are just licensing them. So it's, yeah. And unless he sells the entire building and somebody is wanting to purchase it and can hire the staff back again, I don't know what we can do. It's a dark time in our history. Councillor Mangu.
Yes, thank you. I completely understand Gail's point of view. I've spoken to many hospital employees who also are worried about the number of retirees moving to the community and not having the facilities to service them. I wonder if IHA takes this into consideration. Are our demographics the same as other communities? Do we need to reach this 12,000 level? Because I'm not sure we're going to reach that for some time, but we have seniors that need help now. I wonder if they can change their requirements, because their requirements seem to be the problem. And I don't know if we can reach these requirements in time. But this is a very, very serious problem. Thank you.
IHA is aware that we are growing communities. They know that we are looking at potentially 30% of seniors in the community, and that's going up as new people move in. They know of our developments. They know of some of the changes we're making. But again, physicians, they will help with recruitment, but they can't do anything about them. And services, it's a numbers-based system, and
it's not working for us, so we need to lobby to reduce these requirements that work for us, and that's what I'm suggesting. I totally get that we don't meet the requirements.
your microphone is down.
Yeah.
Ms. Blue.
What I was going to say is, it's more about expanding the service area. It's not about reducing anything, it's expanding the service area. We have to look at where the people are coming from. Like, it's not just Merritt proper.
Yes, I agree. And it's also about looking at regional services and trying to get regional services in here so that the whole region expands. And I've been trying to look at bringing in regional detox, and that may have something to do with it.
I think what I'm hearing a lot of, and I just would like to try putting what I think I'm collectively hearing, it really is more of a marketing issue than anything else, because at the end of the day, if we're going to get doctors to come to Merritt, they have to come for a business purpose. Like, they're only going to come if they want to make a viable go of business here in Merritt. Some of that is metrics and numbers, which is understanding what our training area is and making that very clear. So I don't know exactly what is being communicated from IH when they're doing their recruiting. Maybe they're using, a smaller number, but if we can, accurately say that we have a trading area of 14,872, which I think is pretty close to what it is. Then, making sure that the right information as we market is getting out, I think is one portion of that. And so I think that there is an opportunity to have a conversation with IH to see, okay, how are we marketing ourselves? The second bit, though, I think has actually nothing to do with IH, and it's how do you make a desirable community? Because at the end of the day, I just had a job interview with one individual today, and his comments, I'm not going to breach any confidence here, but I think of Merritt as a place that you stop through. You pass through, you don't really stop at, right? And we've all heard this from every community, like every family member you've got, and I'll tell you, anybody who actually stops here is like, oh, it's lovely here, I like this place, but you have to get people to stop, to enjoy, and so a lot of this is not necessarily just doctor-related marketing, it is City of Merritt marketing. We are not a community that's bounded between two frozen, frigid highways that's like a frozen hell all winter. It's basically very nearly Okanagan weather, a little bit more wind, but we've got tons of recreational opportunities all around us for anybody that's interested in it. And you look at it, I just think Merritt has so much more going for it than the reputation that it has, and that starts with each one of us and how we talk about our community, how we represent our community, whether it's in person or online, as well as kind of more formal marketing avenues for how we show people that Merritt is a fantastic place to be. And so I think that it's not just for doctors, it's just about for everything under the sun. I know that you guys are probably tired of it the same way I am, but it's an uphill battle every time you talk to somebody that it shouldn't be there, because it's a great place to live.
Kyle first and then you. Yeah.
No, you're first, yeah.
I agree with you. We came here for 2 years in 1976, and we're still here. So, it kind of grows on you, right? And I also want to say that I ran into a woman today at the gym who just moved here, and she's lived all over the world, everywhere, literally, she's telling me. And she came here and she's so excited because it's got everything that she wants, and everything that isn't here is with easy access, right? So that was, I thought, oh, that was really neat. What I really wanted to say was, I think it'd be really interesting to, someone could, I could poll the doctor's office, find out how many people are actually on a wait list here. How many there are that do not have doctors. And that is having to travel to Vancouver or Lillooet or wherever, right, to go to their former doctors or keep them.
But you still may not find the ones that are registered in Chase and yet aren't even on a wait list here.
No, that's true.
Because
So it gives you some idea, yeah, that's true.
Jen?
Oh, I was just going to agree with Gail, I guess, in that, yeah, I think that we need to market Merritt in general as a lifestyle choice. I think of Rossland, where my sister-in-law works in a doctor's office, and they have many doctors, but they all work part-time because they've chosen to live there because they've got the ski hill in the winter time and that kind of thing. And so I think, yeah, you're right. I think we need to market this as a real lifestyle choice. Not every doctor, I don't think, wants to work in a big city, but they're not sure what Merritt does have to offer.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. When I lived in Smithers, we had 22 bodies of physicians, but there was only 6 FTEs. And we could not recruit. The ministry refused to even have us send out advertisements for other doctors. But these doctors were more interested in lifestyle than they were being a physician. I mean, it's their right to do that, but it was hard for the community to recruit at that point. I don't know who I've got here. Councilor Fair.
So, what I'm hearing from a business perspective is that, the message is getting out, Merritt's growing and is becoming recognized as an attractive community more and more. So it's a bit puzzling to me when you look at 5-year wait lists for doctors that we aren't getting doctors that want to come here. disturbing possibility is what you mentioned earlier, Mayor Brown, about doctors being, you know, case over there, other doctors. If that's actually happening, it's true, it's like something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, there was, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we've been here a while.
I do want to be really careful and say that what has happened and what is currently happening may be two different things. So this is not slagging anybody if this is getting out there, but again, perception is really important, and we want people to know that they're going to come and be welcomed by a community, not, you know, feel like there's going to be any hostility there. So, yeah,
Well, hold
we're
on.
not slagging who are.
This was a court case back in the 70s, and yes, the community did welcome the physician, and the medical clinic turned her down legally. Gail. Oh, Ellen?
Could we, as a committee, write a letter to Adrian Dix and tell him about the fire points of merit and why we need help?
Tell him about.
Our plight,
Yeah, well, yes, we could write him a letter, we could also meet with him at UBCM, we could have, our council time with him as well, but we could very easily write him a letter. We could also write public health, to look at the complex care beds, as well. We can do all of those things, and I'm willing to participate in any one of those things. I just don't know how effective that's going to be. Gail. And having said that, I will do that, regardless of what I think the outcome would be.
What I was going to say was the fact that new doctors now, the younger doctors, are wanting to not work full-time, that they're wanting to work part-time, that is much more common now. So you're getting doctors that set up practice that only want to work 2 or 3 days a week, and that's all they're doing. So that is a reality, it's much more common. Also, what I've noticed is that because Dr. Soderberg and the clinic has a lot of resident doctors going through and whatever. And when I ask them what they're going to do, they're almost always they're going to be specialists. So I think there's not as many doctors going in to be GPs now. They want to do the specialist things, right? And as for contacting our provincial government and lobbying, absolutely. As a matter of course, I don't know how many of you are aware that I am the IDP liaison here in town. So we needed a new IDP or another position, and we have for a number of years, like probably 5 or 6.
What is IDP?
Infant Development Program. Okay. And because we had a huge wait list and a huge caseload as well, we have been lobbying for a number of years, and finally we went to Jackie Taggart, our MLA. She went to the minister, lobbied for us, and it came through just about 2 months ago. So now we're in the process of hiring another consultant in town, but it takes time, but it does work. So, you may not think it's working because they don't ever tell you anything, but it does help. So yes, absolutely, we need to lobby.
And not just city council.
No.
Every one of you can do exactly the same thing with Adrian Dix, Jackie Taggart. Get to your MLAs, get to the public health officers, write the notes, write a community response to say, this is unacceptable. I don't know what the acceptable is, but the more they hear from us, the more they will respond. Yeah, exactly. If we sit back and not do anything, nothing will happen.
A squeaky wheel.
So we exhausted all conversations today, because I think it's 4 o'clock, it's closing time. And I want to wish you all well, and our next meeting is time
July 26th.
July 26th.
We'll be sending out a meeting invitation to all of the members of I think we decided every couple of months.
That's correct.
So, thank you, this meeting is over.
All right, everyone, I do have a bunch of bus tickets, I think 4 tickets for everybody as well, so I'll give you.
I get on free, so I don't need it.
Okay, I'll take hers.
Is there anybody that needed a copy?
Oh, no, I wanted to tell